Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of the Motivational Millennial Podcast. Today, we are talking with Travis Marsh, who is an entrepreneur and also a startup and entrepreneurial coach. We met Travis at an acro yoga for entrepreneurs event here in the Bay Area, which was really fun. And we're excited to share his story today, in part because he took a huge leap in his journey and had some really wonderful learnings from that to share. So stay tuned. At the end of the show, Blake and I will share our biggest takeaways.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome to the Motivational Millennial Podcast, where we talk with inspiring members of the millennial generation who are living life with a sense of purpose and achieving their dreams. I'm Blake Brandis.
And I'm Ivy LeClaire.
Our motivational millennial guest today is Travis Marsh. Travis graduated salutatorian from University of Florida in engineering. He pursued a successful engineering and sales management career before taking a turn towards the more complex world of what motivates us and what makes us happy. He now splits his time between facilitating interpersonal communications at Stanford Graduate School of Business, running a coaching company focused on startup and entrepreneurs, and building a software company that is trying to bring coaching to more people. When he's not working, he loves getting out to travel to new countries and whatever adventure sports he can find wherever he can find them. Travis, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's so good to be here.
Thank you. So, to start off, we'd love to hear more about what you're up to and why you're passionate about it.
Yeah, I love that question. I'm into everything that pushes my limits. I'm into extreme sports, and I might not be the most coordinated person out there, and I might be the stupidest person out there because of that. But every time I'm out there, I find I learn something new about myself, and I find that pushing my limits and trying to get better is something that helps me learn where my edges are, and I think that translates into what I'm doing with work and my personal life as well. Starting these companies and trying to do what I've done has definitely been an extreme adventure along the way that has been a lot of fun and has helped me learn a ton about myself and what I like to do, what I love to do, and some of what I hate to do as well.
So where does this passion for extreme sports tie into all the entrepreneurial work that you've been doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the risk is evident in both sides, right? There's always a huge risk of failure. There's a lot of freedom in both, right? If it's dirt biking up a mountain, there's the freedom in the air and the open road or the trail. And starting companies, it's all about the freedom to do what you want to do, pick the path, pick the people that you're working with, and pick what you're most passionate about and what I'm trying to bring into the world.
That's awesome. So I'm wondering where this passion for pushing yourself in the extreme, where did that come from? Do you have a defining moment or a story around where that passion came from?
God, maybe hitting my head just one too many times as a kid.
Like, that's awesome. Let's do it again.
Actually, it's not really true. I was a really scared kid. I was definitely much more on the nerdy side. Not very good, not very social, not very good at talking to people. And I realized that wasn't making me happy. And so I had to start changing things. And I guess it started with talking to people. I guess the defining moment was first day of college when I realized that nobody had any preconceptions about what I was. And it was the best time to go, I could be somebody completely different and they won't be onto my secret.
So it sounds like you've reinvented yourself a couple times over the course of your life.
Yeah, I'd say that's very true. That seems to be kind of an odd thing, maybe, or maybe it's something that's becoming more common for millennials. And I realize that there's lots of different pieces of us that might be true. And what I did, last year or last decade isn't the only thing I could do or I could be. And there's other hats to try on.
Okay, so I'd love to hear what some of those hats were. So you already talked about a little bit, your teenage hat, then your college hat. Like, what happened from there until now?
Yeah, the college hat was definitely a little wild and reckless, but It's where I realized that talking with people, interacting with them was really, really fun and exciting for me.
Yeah.
At that time, I was still in engineering and doing well in school, and so the engineering path seemed like a good path towards money, but then it was a switch for me and kind of a new hat when I realized I could marry the two and do technical sales. So the engineering side, and where people really valued the technical abilities that I had, as well as I got to talk to everybody, day in, day out, and that was my entire job. So that was a ton of fun. Switching over to management was something I thought I was going to be wonderful at. Like, I love talking with people. This is going to be great. I was wretched. I was so bad for at least the first couple of years, right? And like the first year, I thought I was good, and that's how bad I was. And that one was what really kind of caused me to pivot to recognize that interpersonal communications goes way deeper than just what it takes to convince somebody that the product that you're offering is useful. There's like a level and a depth that's there that kind of dictates our entire life.
Yeah.
Say more about that.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah.
So I came from a view before that, like, I'm my own person and I do everything because I have this own volition. And then the more I read about psychology and interpersonal dynamics, the more I realize that that's kind of a falsity that my mind creates. Like, if we look at the decisions that we make in life, 5% actually reach the part of the brain that we consider our thinking brain. The 95% of this is actually done by reflex. And it's done more often than not because of the social interactions and the social cues that we have. And so there's, the common idea that we are the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. And the more I've been able to pick apart like what my habits are, what I choose to do, and when I choose to do it, the more I realize that is true for me, and that there's even the layer on the complexity on how I choose to show up with those people I talk to that also influences both me and them.
I think that's really awesome, because what I've found in being really deliberate about my peers is that, like, having to be deliberately trying to bring forth certain characteristics that I'm wanting to bring forth, it makes it easier in some ways,
That was a huge change I noticed when I came out to San Francisco and moved from Florida. And I had great friends that are really nice people, and I love them to death. And then I came out here and I'm sitting in a coffee shop and 2 people next to me are talking about one nonprofit they just started and one, like kind of nonprofit company hybrid that they started that they're trying to do to change the world. And it's common that 9 out of 10 people I meet are trying to do something that I find really interesting. And that's changed how I view the world and how I view what I might be able to do in a really positive way.
So, on your quest to change the world in the ways that you're able to, what kind of challenges have you faced, and how have you overcome them?
I mean, one of the trickiest ones was finding a passion. So it was great. I always said I wanted to start a company as soon as I figure out what I'm passionate about. And in the meantime, I'll just go find something that makes money. And then I found it. The company that I was with, just by happenstance, sent me through like a 6-month intensive coaching training program. And it was the best training I've ever been through. It was transformative for my life. And I was like, awesome. I found my passion. And then I proceeded to not start a company or do anything about it. For a year and a half after that, I kind of putzed around with it part-time. I kind of did a little bit. And it actually took being shook up and facing some real challenge before I decided to jump into this. So I left my partner, my apartment, and my job all in 1 week in February.
Whoa.
right around Valentine's Day.
Whoa.
It's a little bit of a life reset.
Yeah.
I was really scared at that point, and I realized, or I thought at first, I need to get my life stable again. This is not the time to jump in and try and do something crazy like start a company. So I started two. One was clearly not the answer. Because I was able to reframe things and think of it as like, sure, life's in turmoil and I don't know where I'm going to be sleeping next week. But at the same time, I've got the freedom to go and be anywhere. I've got a shot that I can take right now that I was different than any other time. And it was definitely a wake-up call at the same time.
Yeah, so was that this February?
That was a little over a year ago.
Okay, so it was like last year.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that feel? I mean, I guess it's been about a year, so I'm wondering like how you're feeling about that decision.
I'm incredibly happy about the decision now. It was a rocky road for a little while. There was all of the emotions. There was like a lot of ecstatic and I'm happy and like, oh my God, there's so much possibility. There was also like the yelling and the screaming and sometimes the crying too.
Yeah. So what was the transition into happy like? So
good question. It wasn't like a defining like, oh, now life is good. Honestly, like happy right now is 100% true. Mm-hmm. And I am sure sometime in the next week, it's going to be filled with some sort of fear or trepidation or self-doubt that creeps back in, right? Mm-hmm. The nice part now is that I've got a lot of tools that help me rebound from that quickly, that it doesn't send me for a loop. So I might be feeling rough around the edges for an hour or two and some point, but I can come back out of it and get back to that happy space a lot quicker.
So how do you bounce back from that?
It's a good question. It kind of depends on where the sadness is coming from. A lot of times it's like a lack of self-compassion. That's why I was such a crappy manager. Was the lack of self-compassion I had translated to a complete lack of compassion for anybody else. I was very hard and have very high standards, and if I don't meet my own standards, I get very down on myself, and then I don't meet and do anything, and that kind of spirals. The easiest way out is to just suck it up and do something for a little while, and that's quick. If that doesn't work, my stronger kick is actually to go back and meditate. And I hate meditating. I'm not. There's wonderful people that are mindful all the time, and they do a really good job of this. That is not me. But I learned through I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat of Vipassana. And in the first day, I did more meditation than I had in my entire life. It was painful and wonderfully learning. And through that is where I learned that meditation helps me find self-compassion when nothing else will.
Wow, yeah. I was wondering if you've done any kind of, are you doing a loving kindness? Are you deliberately sitting there and thinking about self-compassionate thoughts towards yourself, like a loving kindness practice toward yourself, or is it just the act of allowing the settling and the peace that brings the self-compassion in? Yeah,
actually, now that you mention it, probably a loving kindness meditation would be more powerful. So I'm taking note. I'll probably try that next time. No, I do the attention-focused meditation, the really simple focus on my breath. And it just brings everything back into a perspective for me.
Yeah, that's great. It's so powerful what you're talking about, self-compassion. That's one of the things that we talk about with Motivational Millennial is self-compassion being a really big part of it. The way that we'd framed it was, about being for that self-compassion when you're hitting those roadblocks and those challenges. But I love what you're bringing in and saying that self-compassion also helps you become more compassionate with other humans, which can also be a really great benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had the hardest time separating like high goals and high aspirations with self-compassion, right? It seemed like those things appeared to be antithetical to me for the longest time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't actually until I went on the meditation retreat where I said, I can still have high expectations for the future. And as soon as the past is in the past, I can go, oh, what can I learn from that for next time? Because I can't change it. Beating myself up isn't going to help me have higher expectations for the future.
Yeah.
So now that you're facilitating the interpersonal communications work at Stanford, how do you see that self-compassion practice playing out with your interactions with others and some of the things that you teach in the course?
Thing that came to mind was that I started off thinking like everybody's points of view was equal. Like if I have to step outside my own head, then we all have equal voice in this matter, which was a great stepping stone. But it just didn't jive with how I saw the world, right? How do you get things done? How do I have big aspirations on big things I want to do if not everybody has these same aspirations or doesn't want the same thing out of life? And so what I realized is that I can have a respect for other people's opinions and their thoughts and ideas and still have my own and still have a belief about which ones are right. And I think the self-compassion has really taught me that it doesn't matter where the opinion comes from. I'm way less attached to ideas that I create, and I'm way more open and flexible to take on whatever seems like the best idea, no matter where it comes from.
Well, I love this because you've been talking about all of these awesome perspectives. One being, like, I didn't know what my passion was, and I was like, what am I doing? And then you're finding it. And then the second part of that is like moving forward with your passion in mind. And so I'm wondering what advice, and you've been giving so much great tools just now, but what advice you would have for other millennials who have kind of been experiencing a similar path.
The advice that comes to mind is don't be afraid of the hard stuff. The hard stuff is where the interesting things is hiding under. So all the things that I've found that are the most useful and the most differentiated were on the other side of some really hard challenges. Whether that was getting an engineering degree or trying to start a business or whatever it was, there was a lot of work in it and a lot of kind of joy and interest and passion and purpose on the other side.
So when you're working on the hard stuff and things don't go according to plan, do you try to push through it? Do you pivot? How do you assess when to persevere and when to quit and take a different direction?
Yeah. So the engineer in me comes out in this one, like very hard, like my engineer OCD, however you want to say it or see it, is I've kind of looked at the world through two lenses. Like, how often do I need to be like evaluating the bigger picture stuff, and how much time do I need to be spending just going and doing? Mm-hmm. My favorite new mantra is I like to act my way to clarity. So I like to spend 90 to 95% of my time doing, and then 5 to 10% going back and saying, excellent, what have I learned and how can I change directions, and is this really what I care about, what I'm passionate about, what I'm interested in? So I give myself a couple of hours on a Friday afternoon to go back and rethink about where I want to go in the following week, and then I try and take a couple of days a year as well doing the same thing.
That's so awesome that you do that you take the time deliberately every week and even more a couple times a year to reflect, because the doing, I think a lot of us really value the doing, which is totally awesome, but there's also like that piece that you're saying, how can I grow, how can I move forward or expand if I'm not also looking back at what I'm learning? I think that's super awesome.
Yeah, and speaking of good rituals, we'd love to hear a little bit more about what motivates you. And first of all, I'm curious, what do you do after you wake up in the morning to ensure that you're going to have a great day? In an ideal day, not necessarily every day, but just in an ideal day.
Yeah, most of the time. It's on my calendar every day. I've been using Miracle Morning, which is a book by Hal Elrod. I've been trying this for the last 3 months or so, and he's got an entire scheme that goes, and it seems like it might take a couple of hours. I've trimmed it down to 6 minutes, and it's because he's got 6 things, so I give a minute each. And so I start off with a minute of meditating, then a minute of reading affirmations on things which only took me 10 or 15 minutes to write. Just this is what I think I do well. A minute of writing things I'm grateful for, a minute of exercise, a minute of reading, and then a minute of visualizing what does a good day look like.
Wow. It's like you're so accomplished after 6 minutes.
It feels like a good start whenever I can do it. It happens. I get it done 4 out of 5 days of the week now.
Wow, that's impressive.
So what does the past 3 months look like then of doing this in the mornings?
The biggest changes I've noticed is just 60 seconds of exercise is better than a cup of coffee. So that's easier and healthier too, at least to my mind. That's been really powerful. And the 60 seconds on trying to figure out and rearrange my calendar is normally what the visualizing what does a good day look like has also made me more aware of the big things that I should be doing and that I want to do that might have slipped by for all the email and phone calls and all the other stuff that just can suck up time.
I love too that in 6 minutes, that's sort of what you were saying, Ivy, you've accomplished so much. And the reason I think that's really powerful is because 6 minutes, at least for me, it's like, oh, that's, 1/4 of the time I spend on Facebook when I wake up in the morning. And so just thinking about how you can intentionally structure that time to, like you said, orient your mind, your body, your emotional state. That's really inspiring for me personally, and I'm just thinking, I could take 6 minutes in the morning. It doesn't have to be this giant routine that sit down and focus. No, you just do it. So I like the doing part of that too, because if you know that you have this plan in place, then it gives you your structure to start without having to sit there. Okay, now do I eat breakfast first? Do I shower? Should I try to get some exercise? Do I need to get this email? Instead, it gives a nice structure to it.
Yeah, it's easy to do in the morning without thinking because I'm not terribly good until I get some either coffee or some exercise in me.
That's awesome. So you mentioned that book, but do you have another a motivational quote or a phrase or a book that you'd like to share that's changed your life?
The one that comes to mind is like a classic, an oldie but a goodie. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Mm-hmm. It was the first one that I read, and I always say, horrible title, wonderful book, right? It just sounded so cheesy to me when I was first thinking about this. But Stephen Covey and everything he does has been incredible for me, and it kind of set me on this journey like a decade ago of learning about myself, learning that I've got more control than I thought I had, and that's been a real privilege.
Is there one of the habits that really speaks to you or that you find yourself returning to?
What we were just talking about was putting first things first. That one is a lot of what my importance is now. There's a lot of the time I'm spending is doing solo work, and so it's kind of all I'm building up these companies. A lot of things I need to do for my own, but all the interpersonal ones actually seem to trump that as soon as I have a conversation with somebody else. First things first is the one I think of more often than not.
That's great, staying focused. Yeah, I always go to the 4 quadrants of what's important, what's urgent, what's unimportant and not urgent, and really trying to get most things into the important and not urgent quadrant versus the important and urgent, or more disturbingly, unimportant and urgent, which I think, as you're alluding to, can always tend to, oh, but this phone call and this email needs a response right now, and it's so easy to lose an entire day or even an entire week in that sandpit. So.
So true.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this and taking some time with us. We really want to provide you, though. Tell us how our audience can learn more about you and just get more of you in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been wonderful being here. Wonderful talking with you both. And for finding out more about me, the best place to find me is online at themastersmark.com, which is my personal website. And if you're interested in something a little bit more broader or the technology side, Courage Labs is the software company where we're trying to bring coaching out to the world.
Great.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
Travis, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome to the after show for Travis Marsh's interview. A great conversation with Travis. I really like that guy's voice, by the way. He's just got a really slow, deliberate voice.
Yeah. Like kind of raspy in a good way.
Yeah, hopefully it comes across well on the recording. But I was noticing that when we were talking with him. It's really fun. I think my biggest takeaway, or one of them, from the conversation with Travis is this quote he said early on, which is, there are different pieces of us that might be true. And I think I kind of just let that pass as sort of part of his journey and how he was recognizing there were a few different things he could do in his life. But the more I think about it, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, because it's thinking about there are pieces of us that might be true that I can have both a good connotation and a challenging connotation when I look at it as potential. So there are all these different pieces of us that might be true, and look at the options that we could go this way. We could explore this thing. We could take on this project or this identity or this goal. And that's really exciting because I think it's living in a place of possibility. But also there's this sort of Sylvia Plath in the bell jar idea of there are different pieces of us that might be true and we can't pursue all of them. And so in the bell jar, the protagonist is looking up at this tree as a metaphor for her life, and she sees all this fruit and she realizes that there are all these opportunities, but as time passes, they drop off the tree one by one because she's paralyzed and can't, make the decision. And I feel sometimes that element of potential can feel paralyzing, and there's the FOMO, the fear of missing out that can happen, where we look at all these things we could be doing or we could be, and just saying, oh, I could be this and could be that, and then feeling so stuck in a place and not choosing this, not choosing that, and am I living by default, I think is really the fear for me that can come out of that. And so I think my takeaway is that I really want to try to live more deliberately from a place that these pieces of us that might be true are within our power and within our reach. And we don't have to commit to only one of them, in a bit of a Whitman-esque, I am multiple sort of idea. But then again, we also can't commit to all of them. So I think there's a certain balance of wanting to explore the possibilities without getting so wrapped up in, I could try to do all these things and I don't know if I'm going to be good enough, and so I won't try any of them and just follow the path of least resistance. So I don't know that I have an answer for that, but I think it was a really provocative idea that stuck out to me.
That made me think of so many different things. First, it made my cheerleader come out, that in response to the fruit decaying and dying and never having that opportunity to do that, because I do think that for a grand majority of things that we want to pursue, that being too old or no longer being able to do that can be a story or a saboteur voice that's happening. But along those lines, there really may be things that come up, that we need extreme dexterity or something, to accomplish. So I think we talk a lot about our passion, finding a passion. That's what the biggest thing that we're talking about. And I think sometimes it can feel as though you have to have one passion and you're going to have that passion forever until you die. And that's not true. It's about finding a balance, like you're saying. There's the wanting to do all the things, and so you don't commit and allow yourself to have the depth. But then there can also be pursuing one path and then never letting yourself try anything new because you feel like this has to be that path. So I think what the middle road can do, which for me the middle road is knowing what is bringing you purpose now, knowing what you're passionate and excited about now, and allowing yourself to commit to that and see where it takes you. If you are living your life with a sense of purpose, no matter how that sense of purpose or passion is actually manifesting specifically, but if you're in the habit of allowing yourself to live in alignment with your values and move forward with that sense of purpose and passion, then along your path, new doors will open, new paths will come in front of you, and you will have spent time cultivating this viewpoint of, I'm going to move forward with the thing that's calling me, really calling me in this moment. So only you can know that, though, you know. It's not one cut and dry way to find your passion and pursue it, and only you can really know that. And so it's definitely it's a middle of the road, but it also involves knowing yourself and trusting yourself along the way.
Yeah, and being present and focusing on the present, I think, is a really important part of that too, because like you said, with the tree, is all about the future and projecting into the future. And ironically, it may feel like there's a lot of fear and uncertainty around that, which there is, but I think there's also, as you're saying, a certain degree of overconfidence, because this idea that we can control the future, we can know the future, which I think what you said about pursuing your purpose is so important, because if the purpose is the thing that's guiding you, then all of the twists and turns and events that come up, they might change the direction you're going in somewhat, but they're not changing your fundamental purpose and drive. And like you said, not that has to be one thing all the time. Like you decide on to commit to it and you're going to go down that road for the next 50 years. But understanding and listening to yourself, is this true for me? Is this still true for me? And you can be strategic and do that. I think sometimes my inner critic pushes back against that kind of idea, because it says, well, if you're always living in the present, you're not planning and being strategic about the future. And how are you going to be successful if you're not planning and being strategic about the future? Gosh. But I think you can be strategic and also be present. And in some ways, being present is the most strategic. It's the idea of radical acceptance, because you're looking at things as they actually are, not as you want them to be, not as you wish they would be. And so if you're taking an honest and accurate assessment of it, then you can make decisions that are better informed, because they're not based on hypothesis or hope, although I think hope is important for anything, but not blind hope, not just I'm sure it'll all work out, have no idea how, but
yeah, hope where you have no authority or
agency.
Where you're not
waiting to win the lottery, basically.
Not, exactly. I hear what you mean. Yeah, absolutely. I know. I could continue forever talking about the different path of passions and everything.
So, Ivy, what was your biggest takeaway from the conversation with Travis?
So there was a moment where he was talking about that huge leap that he made, where the infamous February of the past, where he made all of these changes and eventually found this sense of happiness that he was discovering in the present moment. And I asked about the path to the happiness, and he talked about challenges and all of these things, and he said, I'm happy now. And of course I'm paraphrasing, but he's saying, I'm happy now, but I'm not necessarily going to be happy next week. And it's about having an understanding of what things help you in those moments of sadness or those moments of despair. And for him, it was self-compassion, meditation and those sorts of things, which is absolutely wonderful. And for me, I really resonated with this because we often feel like when we are on a path, we often feel like in the pursuit of happiness, once we reach happiness and we feel happiness, that's it and that's the end and you're there and you're happy forever. Or we perceive that that's how it should be. And so in reality, everything is temporary. All of our emotions are temporary. All of our circumstances are temporary. That is the only constant, is that things change. For me, what can happen is, since I've been on this very deliberate path over several years of personal development and finding happiness or fulfillment or enlightenment or whatever iteration of that, it feels like when I reach that and I'm in alignment with all the things and I feel really good and I feel really great, that's going to be permanent because I love it so much and it feels so great. And so inevitably, when things came up, challenges come up, the saboteur mind takes over, there can be a moment of thinking, oh my goodness, why am I not happy anymore? Like, what have I done wrong? What additional growth do I need to do so that I can stay happy forever? And I realized recently that in those moments of feeling overwhelmed or stress, or in some cases feeling helpless or powerless, I had believed that I was powerless. Mm-hmm. And a part of me thought happiness is never going to return. But I think, recently I realized that the truth is that we always have power. Like, I have always been powerful. If I had this, imagine a huge bucket and it has all my power, like the power I was born with in it, or the power we are born with in it. And if we had this bucket and it was limited, and every single time we felt sad or depressed or powerless, it diminished, then we would eventually have no power left. And I know this not to be true because of the decisions that I've made, the courage that it's taken to move across the country and do all these things. And we know that to be true in ourselves. It's not diminishing. It's just the viewpoint that we're having in that particular moment. Like, that's all it is. We may end up feeling and extrapolating so much more out of just having an emotion into a whole story about how we're actually powerless and all of these things. But I liked what he was saying because it reminded me of this perspective, because he's just saying I'm kind of rolling with it. He's not having that attachment to needing to be happy.
I really love the image of you have a bucket of power. And I feel like what you're saying is that sometimes we put the lid on the bucket and think there's nothing inside of it, versus recognizing that we can take the lid off the bucket and there's always the power inside of it. It's just, there's a lid on top. And so you put your hand on it, I can't, I don't have any power, But it's like, that's because there's a lid on. And that lid is, like you said, it's the story or the belief.
Yeah. It's the perspective we're having, not the reality.
Yes. The reality is the bucket's always full.
Yeah. And it's always open. It doesn't have a lid on it. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's easier said than done, I feel.
Yeah.
Just like anything though, right? In terms of having that awareness and that acceptance and knowing of everyone having that power in them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I want to tap into more of my power bucket.
There should be a power vase or so, I don't know, a power...
I mean, power bucket sounds really real, though.
Power
it's like there's chicken in it and power. It's my power bucket.
It feels very utilitarian,
But isn't it, though? Isn't it the most utilitarian thing ever? That's how we can tap into our inner power, is just reach into the bucket, pull out some power. Maybe it's my southern roots. I think of buckets fondly,
My bucket has flower stickers on it.
See, your bucket has flower power. Oh, man. Too funny. All right. Great. Well, thank you all so much. As we digress, thank you all so much for tuning into the Motivational Millennial Podcast today. And we hope to talk with you again soon. Take care.
Bye.
For show notes and upcoming guests, or to learn more about Coactive Coaching, the blog, and our other awesome offerings, visit motivationalmillennial.com. Keep in touch with us at facebook.com/motivationalmillennial.
We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email with your thoughts, comments, and suggestions at podcast@motivationalmillennial.com. And tell us who you might like to hear from, or if you think you or anyone you know would be good for the show.
The Motivational Millennial Podcast is edited by Christy Hostler and Team Podcast.
Our theme music was composed and performed by Blake Brandis. Have a great week, Motivational Millennials!